This video is intended only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. People often say that Easter is religious in nature, that it's something Christian or pagan in origin. I'm here to tell you that it's something far different than you've ever dreamed. I grew up in a small town in Northern Europe, one of those picturesque little villages that you see on postcards. The kind with lots of farms, a cute little Main Street area that's all cobbled stone and brick buildings, a little downtown area with an open-air market, and lots of hard-working people in rustic clothes with various farming implements herding animals to and fro. I lived above one of those shops with my parents. They ran a general store and I helped out until I left when I was 16. They were good people, and I don't think they really agreed with what happened. They weren't the kind of people who fell in with religious fervor, but they understood its purpose, the purpose it serves for the community, and they participated, even if unwillingly. The celebration of Lady Eostre was not as old as the village itself, but almost. On Easter Sunday, 12 of the town's children were pushed from their homes and led into the square in the middle of town. Their ages were between 6 and 15, and the event was always preceded by merriment before the night itself. There was a carnival that week. Feasts were eaten, gifts were given, and then the night that everyone dreaded inevitably came. I don't remember much about those nights. I remember the underlying dread I felt as I sat in my room. I remember the silent tears I cried without knowing why. I remember the relief I felt when I'd awaken the next morning to see that it was daylight again. That and the screams. I still hear the screams sometimes when the nightmares come. To understand why this happens, you'd first have to understand Our Lady. The Lady Eostre was one hallowed deity. She was the goddess of dawn, and the rays that she brought had nourished the land for the founders of the region. Eostre had shown them where to go, where to plant, and the bountiful harvests made the towns rich and the cities prosper. They praised her for her generosity and gifts, but she told them too late that there was a price. You see, she hadn't told them what else lay in that valley. There's a cave near Father's Glen, a huge dank maw that breeds nothing but shadows and pain. Those who go in never come out, and it's where the children of Eostre reside. Legend says that once they were birds, creatures of the wind who were free to fly as they would. Eostre turned them into hares, an animal more fitting for a season of fertility and growth. The hares were pleased with this, now free to explore the land as they had seen it from above. But over time, they grew to hate the children of men, who often hunted them and their smaller cousins. When people moved into the valley, they began to hunt the rabbits for food, which infuriated the hares. The valley was said to be thick with rabbits and hares at one point, but the humans were in for a surprise as they filled their stew pots. The hares began to come out at night to hunt the men, and many of the hares and the humans died as a result. The ensuing scrimmages were good for no one, so Eostre stepped in. In her infinite wisdom, Eostre brokered a trade, a contest of sorts. If you would hunt the humans, then give them the same chance you have. For one night, the weakest of them will hide and run from sunset to sunrise, and any you catch will be your prize. Once a year, you will send 12 of your young ones, one for each month you have hunted the hares, and they will search for them. If they find them, they may take them back to their cave. Those not found will be free to go about their lives until called upon again. My hares will remain below the ground every other night, never to hunt a human under my protection. This is my decree, and all shall abide. And so it has been from that day on. I was chosen only once to participate in the festival. The town wasn't huge, maybe 30 or 40 children of the desired age at any given time, and it wasn't uncommon for a name to come out of the kettle more than once. My friend Maria was chosen 4 times but managed to hide until dawn on all but the last time. A sibling could go in your place, and sometimes they did. One year, I remember a boy named Alan went in his sister's place and was supposed to have killed 3 hares before they got him. I never saw the bodies. Everything was cleaned up as it always was when we came out the next day. Most years I just sat in my room with the doors and windows locked as I cried into my arms and tried not to listen to the children below as they screamed. Most years, only a few lucky kids came back. I was fortunate enough to come back when I was selected. I suppose I wouldn't be telling you this story otherwise. I was 8 when I went out to do my duty, as my mother put it. I was scared, but a part of me just couldn't believe I would die or never come back. I was young and all children believe themselves to be immortal. Hell, even the thought of rabbits coming to get me made me giggle. I could just imagine the little bunnies with torches and pitchforks hopping along as they tried to catch a bunch of terrified children. Even as the nun told us about it in the local school, I giggled a little, earning a smack with the ruler for my insolence. You won't think it's funny when you're on the street some night and they come for you. I saw my father's face when my name was drawn and couldn't understand his terror. I heard the screams, of course, but I believed they were just people putting on. I knew that people got killed, but I didn't believe it. Why would my parents send me out to do something that could get me killed? My parents loved me, and I knew they wouldn't want me to come to harm. I was confident that this was like Father Christmas or the Tooth Fairy, just a bit of harmless hogwash for children. I had never actually known any of the children that didn't return, so it was like nothing had changed from year to year. How small my world was and how frightening it seems now that I was so naive. So I sat at the feasts, played the games, and enjoyed myself that week. I saw some of the other children who'd been chosen, and while some looked scared, others clearly didn't grasp what was in store either. They joked about rabbit hunts and bringing carrots to feed the bunnies. We all laughed and talked about how brave we would be, but none of us really understood what was about to happen to us. Then came Sunday night, and I think it all became real to me. My mother called me into the kitchen just as the sun began to sparkle at the edge of the horizon. She presented me with some gifts for tonight. She had brought me a pair of soft black pants and a very tight shirt. She put a pair of soft shoes on my feet, and I could feel their delicate material hug me gracefully. Listen to me very closely, because what I tell you might save your life. On the night I was chosen to participate, I hid in the horse shed near the drawbridge. The smell of hay seemed to make me harder to find, and if you bury yourself deep into the stack, you should be safe until morning. Don't try to fight them. Don't be careless or brash. Just run, hide, and survive. I love you. Your father loves you, and we wish there was any other way but this one.
We wish there was some way to help you,
my father said suddenly, coming in from his study and startling me.
But this is all we can offer you. Good luck. We hope to see you in the morning.
Then they hugged me, both of them enveloping me in their shared embrace, before leading me to the door and showing me out into the semi-darkness. I walked to the square, unafraid as the gaslights flared cheerfully. Why should I be afraid? This was my home. I had run over these streets with my friends. We played by the fountain in the square. We had gone to the market and bought candy and toys with our allowance, and we had gossiped and giggled as we walked to school. Nothing here could hurt us. Nothing here could threaten us as the warm stones of our hometown wrapped us in a cocoon of safety. This was just a game that grown-ups played, and it would prove as hollow as the stories of the boogeyman or the goblins who came to take away naughty children. I could see the others as they filtered into the square, but there was no quiet chatter or laughter now. As the sun set, casting the last of its light on the town, we heard the bell toll and saw the mayor come out on the balcony that overlooked the square. He looked resplendent in his long coat, his shoes with the buckles gleaming in the dancing torchlight, as he stared down at us from his high perch. He looked sorry to see us here, but resolute in his decision. He would carry this out, and he would step back inside, so he didn't have to watch the results of his actions.
We give thanks to Eostre for a bountiful harvest, for the valley where we live, and for the gifts she has given us generations ago. We ask her to watch over these little ones as they hide from her children. May she take pity on them and let them come home again.
He said more, going on for what felt like hours, but my head had turned from him as I heard the noise. It was the harsh flop of 2 large feet, the echoing thump of heavy footsteps, and as I looked, I saw them. There were 3 of them, all tall and lithe, with arms and legs too long to be human. They didn't so much walk as they galloped, as if walking on two legs was never something that would become normal for them. As the mayor droned on, I saw one of them become too eager and step close to the edge of the alley they were hiding in. His fur was snowy white, a speckling of brown making him look as though he had freckles from his chest to his nose. Around his neck and across his shoulders, to my surprise, were feathers, and I remembered suddenly that they had once been birds. His mouth had a distinctly beakish look, and I felt a cold dread creep into me as this creature hulked at the ready. It held a delicate-looking flint knife in its too large hand, and my humor at the thought of being hunted by bunnies was gone now. They were not the cute hopping creatures you sometimes saw in the glen. These were like the trolls and goblins we were told stories about, old and mean and utterly devoid of human kindness.
As the sun sets, I beg you all to flee. Go now before they are set loose by that ancient promise.
Some of the others had seen them too, and I was suddenly aware that the press around me was thinning. Children of all ages were running, fleeing into the corridors and alleys we all knew so well. I was running too, leaving behind the few who still gaped at the mayor as he moved away. They would give me time to run as the creatures found them first. Their screams were high and terrified, but mercifully short. I ran for the stables just like Mother had told me to, but the hares didn't stay in the square for long. The streets echoed with those strange hopping thuds, and I could hear them as they caught the others. The children were easy to track. They wept, their feet thudded loudly, their breathing was much too deep, and the hares seemed to locate them easily as I ran for my life. Unlike the others, my shoes seemed to whisper over the cobbles. They were soft, hugging my feet like a second skin, and though the night was breezy, I never heard my clothes so much as flap. I was like a shadow as I traversed the streets of my home, and when I saw the bridge looming up in the distance, I put on an extra burst of speed. When I heard the flapping, galloping sound of those wide, flat feet, I threw myself against a nearby wall and stayed as quiet as possible. I could hear it as its feet slapped hard at the cobbles, its nose twitching as it tasted the air that stank of humanity. The sound of its twitching nose made my skin crawl, the noise akin to bugs as they nest beneath a loose cobble. I put a hand over my mouth as my fearful breathing threatened to give me away. I couldn't tell you how long I stood there, time seeming to creep by as the creature looked and sniffed. Fear time is always different from actual time, and the stretch of seconds can take decades in that moment of extreme terror. Then, mercifully, he left, and I ran like the rabbit I had become for the stables. The stables were empty and the horses taken elsewhere, but the hay trough still remained. I plunged into the itchy depths, making myself into a ball as I shuddered at the bottom of the pile. The clothes my mother had given me were long-sleeved and legged, so I only had to cover my face so the itchy depths wouldn't give me away. The scent of hay was strong, and the dust that coated me made me stifle and sneeze. I had to be silent. I couldn't do anything to give myself away. I lay at the bottom of that trough for hours, my adrenaline running high and my ears straining for the smallest sound. I heard them when they came in the first time. There had to be at least 2 of them. Their feet slapped at the cobbles as they searched the stalls. I heard them turn over tubs, open closets where only horse tack waited, and grumble in their strange language when they found nothing. When one of them came towards the hay, though, I thought I was done for. I dug through the hay, pulling handfuls away as it searched. I pressed myself as flat against the bottom as I could manage. I had to stuff my fist into my mouth, careful not to rustle the hay, for fear that I would begin screaming at the thought of those creatures being so close to me. My fist was sweaty, the taste of hay and dust likely to choke me, but I held absolutely still as it threatened to uncover my hiding spot. When it sneezed, the dust getting into its nose, I almost sighed in relief. It scooped out a few more handfuls before stopping, sneezing again as it moved away. Those deep thumps took it out of the horse stall, and I was left to shiver and shake as my adrenaline coursed fresh through me. Somehow, as the adrenaline ebbed and my body began to ache, I fell asleep at the bottom of the trough. When I awoke, it was daytime, and the night of terror was at an end. My mother found me, hay still clinging to me as I walked towards home. She pulled me close and kissed my hair, thanking Eostray for my safe return. Given that Eostray had been responsible for what had happened last night, it seemed silly to thank her. That night was 15 years ago, and I've since moved from my small rural town. Hamburg makes the place I was born look like a dirt track, and after college I found work as a foreman in a textile mill. My parents call me once a week, sending letters in this age of email instead of getting with the times. I've settled down now, had a child of my own, and our conversations always seem to turn to when will they get to meet their grandson. My answer is always the same: when you come to Hamburg to see him. After what I've witnessed in that place, after sitting in my room for 8 years with the knowledge of what was going on outside the walls of my house, I will be damned if I ever let my son anywhere close to their warren or those snuffling monstrosities. So when you hear of the resurrection, as you bite the ears off your chocolate bunny, count yourself lucky that you live without the fear that was such a part of my childhood. Remember that somewhere there is a bunny that would love nothing more than to bite the ears off of you. The Pottsville Annual Easter Egg Hunt of 1980. I can still remember it like it was yesterday. At the time, I was 9 years old. Like the other kids my age, I was excited about the upcoming Easter egg hunt. That year, I was determined to collect the most Easter eggs and beat Susie Jenkins' previous record. Anyway, Pottsville is a small town with a population of about 10,000. It's your typical Midwestern town, much like Mayberry, where everybody knows each other and has just enough amenities to get by. For about 100 years or so, Pottsville had been holding its annual Easter egg hunt, which was often followed by the community potluck. I always looked forward to the community potluck too. Anyway, I remembered that day the town square was packed, but you could tell everybody was on edge. You see, about a month earlier, a giant meteor had landed on Old Man Johnson's egg farm. After the meteor landed, it caused a huge explosion that was felt throughout the neighboring counties. I could hear the grown-ups talking about the giant meteor since it was the biggest thing to happen in Pottsville since the Great Train Wreck of 1945. Of course, several experts from the nearby university were called into town. The meteor was said to have been the size of a car, but that could have been an exaggeration on their part. All this talk about meteors was boring me, and besides, it was almost time for the Easter egg hunt to begin. Soon the subject of the meteor was forgotten, only to be replaced with thoughts of the upcoming hunt. All I could think about was how many eggs I could find. Luckily, I spotted my first egg 5 minutes into the hunt. Something was weird about this egg, though. Instead of your standard dyed egg, this one was black, reminding me of the eggs in the movie Alien. Anyway, I stared at it in awe, and I could feel something moving inside it, causing me to drop the strange-looking egg. At this point, the egg was beginning to crack. An awful smell like sulfur escaped from the egg, almost causing me to pass out. As I steadied myself, I could hear 8-year-old Mary Murphy, who was nearby, let out a shriek. Soon, the whole park was filled with screaming kids and frantic parents as all of the Easter eggs began to burst open, revealing what I could only describe as grotesque-looking rats, with some of the creatures having multiple eyes and legs. Not long after the chaos began to brew, the creatures began attacking all of the people in the park. Those of us who managed to escape ran to the nearby church for refuge. Once inside the church, Father Miller immediately locked the door.
"We should be safe in here for now,"
he said. The church was filled with concerned parents and sobbing children, including me.
"Okay, folks, we need to calm down and figure out what those things are,"
Father Miller said.
"Who are you telling to calm down?"
Old Man Daniels shouted.
"I understand your concerns, but let's be rational here."
Just then, one of the windows shattered and one of the creatures tried to make its way inside, spraying glass everywhere.
"Quick, follow me,"
Father Miller shouted. We all followed him into the church's basement. Once everybody was safe inside, he slammed the door shut and locked it. It was one of those vaulted doors, so we were safe. All of the women and children, including myself, began to cry. You could hear the creatures from above scurrying around. At this point, we were all on edge. So when we heard gunfire off in the distance, we began to cheer. Help was finally here. In the days that followed, the surviving citizens of Pottsville were placed under quarantine, but soon the incident was forgotten and nearly 43 years have passed. Last night, though, at approximately 9 p.m., a huge meteor landed on the Johnson Egg Farm. The annual Easter egg hunt is in 3 weeks, so in the meantime, I'll just wait and see what happens. On one of my nightly strolls, I saw something interesting. Usually, I walk the same route. After work, I change, grab my Raycons, and take a leisurely 2 to 3 mile walk depending on how I feel. It starts out in my neighborhood, a condo community that spans over a couple city blocks. There's a nice park I cut through. It has a bridge where I take a moment to admire the river that runs through. More of a creek, but it's still pretty. If I'm lucky, I'll catch a pair of swans or a mallard family, mom in front, several tiny babies trying their best to follow. Before I exit the park, there is a big open area on both sides of the walking path. On most days, it's filled with the normal park-going activity. Picnics, parents monitoring their children on the playground, baseballs or frisbees being thrown, and a handful of older folks watching the sun go down. What caught my eye was a fairly large pink sign. Even as dusk set in, it was such a brilliant shade of pink, it radiated. From about 50 feet away, it looked out of place. I certainly have never seen it before. Finally getting closer, I can make out the cursive writing. Easter Egg Extravaganza, first annual egg hunt. Please bring your children for a day of family fun. Easter Bunny will be here. And then the requisite who, what, where, when details followed underneath. Well, that seems pretty nice actually. This park usually doesn't do any events, so it's good for the community. Thinking nothing more of it, I finished my walk, noting that not one other person was out that night. It's been a week since my last walk. Busy, unfortunately. It's Saturday night. Most people would be out having fun or having a nice dinner with their significant other. Me, I'm at work. Enough of that. I'm going for my walk. Besides, I can see if they set up for the Easter Egg Extravaganza. Easter is tomorrow, after all. Same process. Change, Raycons in, set list of creepy stories ready. What I saw again was interesting. When I got to the park, not much had changed. No people, which is odd, especially for a Saturday night. The same sign was there, spouting tomorrow's festivities. I can't say why this gave me a weird feeling. I suppose I was expecting to see more things set up. Booths, fenced-off area for the egg hiding, something. Standing there for a while, I finally told myself to move on. Again, not sure why this seems odd to me. What the hell was that? I snapped my head back to where I thought the sound came from. I should have just left when I heard the branch breaking, or whatever it was. Walking into the tree line, where the forested part of the park begins, was a giant rabbit. I don't mean an actual rabbit, of course. Clearly it's a person in a bunny costume. From where I stood, maybe 100 yards away, the upright walking rabbit must have been over 6 feet tall. It was just past dusk, but the fur was white. It was moving methodically as I froze in place watching. Then it turned, locking eyes with me, and I knew exactly where I was. I turned and kicked it out of there, not running but walking very fast. I'm not too proud at all to admit that. I don't want anything to do with the next killer clown fad of 2016, if that's what this is, except with people dressed as bunnies. The worst thing about that rabbit looking at me, its eyes reflected, as if it were a real animal. It could of course be part of the mask. There could have been working lights underneath. I don't know why, but it's possible. Either way, I wasn't waiting to ask. All night I thought about this. Why hasn't anyone been in the park the last 2 times I was there? Why is there just a sign in the middle of the park? There's no trailers, no roped-off area, no nothing. And last but not least, why the shit did I see a giant Easter bunny walking into the woods? I'm not a detective and usually run from any kind of danger, but this I was intrigued with. I had to figure out what the end of this story was going to be. Sunday morning, 10 a.m. I haven't been to church in some time, but I assume in another hour most people will be exiting their places of worship, only to drag their screaming kids to hunt for plastic eggs that contain sugar, little toys, or even money. What a weird tradition linked to the day of Jesus' reanimation. I'm on my way to the park. Thank goodness, a huge breath of relief. It's not busy yet, but children and their parents are trickling in. An area has been set up to take what I assume is pictures with the Easter Bunny. For right now, I'm just going to wait and observe. Yes, I understand this might not look great, but I've dressed in my usual running gear and I'm trying to look like I'm warming up for a run. I don't know. Anything to not seem too out of place here. In the middle of my warm-up, there it is. I can't believe what I'm seeing. The same man in a bunny outfit about 50 yards from the children hiding Easter eggs. Do the kids not see that that thing is just blatantly placing their little plastic prizes down right now? Shouldn't that have been done way ahead of time? Come to think of it, there doesn't seem to be other employees around either. Maybe the parents showed up too early and they weren't ready to set up yet, but the parents aren't really paying attention, strangely. It reminded me of a movie called Harvey, starring James Stewart. This imaginary bunny follows the main character around and he's the only one that can see him. The bunny man gets closer. Now my skin is going cold. Could he possibly recognize me? It's most likely the closer it gets. Broad shoulders, even under the outfit. Over 6 feet, I can clearly see now. Its walk, though, just seems off, like an animatronic. One more thing I don't like is the suit itself. It's dirty. There's long dark spots staining the front like a car exhaust backfired onto it, and most bunny costumes have that hula hoop type thing inside to make the appearance of a bigger belly. Even though he had broad shoulders, I could tell he was very slight. Disturbingly so, even. The costume just hung off him. An emaciated rabbit is more sickening to see than I thought.
Welcome!
I almost fell at the sound of the bullhorn. My earbuds were in but not on, and it was still loud enough to give me a nice little jump scare. A man dressed casually in khakis and a pastel purple shirt was the voice behind the noise amplifier. He went on to say that the festivities will begin shortly, get ready for the bunny, etc. A squeal erupted from the crowd of kids that had now grown to about 75 or so. Some parents clapped, some admonished their children for screaming so loud. I looked back to where the sickly Easter bunny was. He was staring at me. We stood looking at each other for maybe 10 seconds, and then he slowly walked back to the woods. I had to ask the man behind the bullhorn about this. I did my best to gain composure. Taking a deep breath, I made my way towards him. Hi, hello? I said, trying to sound as normal as possible. He politely turned to me with a half smile and his eyebrows raised. How may I help you kind of look. Yes, my kids are so excited for this egg hunt. I figured I should throw in the farce of having children here to not set off any alarm bells. And I just thought it was strange that you had the Easter bunny hiding eggs while the children were here. Not a huge deal or anything, but... The man's head moved back slightly, pushing his chin into his neck. His face scrunched up in confusion. Laughing, he spoke.
Haha, sir. We made sure to hide the eggs early this morning, when no one was around. We certainly wouldn't have the Easter bunny here in full view hiding eggs.
That familiar feeling of my blood turning into ice slowly crept back in. I tried my best to keep my cool. But clearly he was just here. I saw him. Before I could finish my sentence, the man looked over to the chair and booth where the children would be taking pictures with the Easter bunny. A proper bunny-costumed person came out from behind the curtain setup. The man once again put the bullhorn to his mouth. This time when he used it, it sounded like he was speaking underwater.
Oh my goodness! The Easter bunny is here, kids! Parents, please line your children up. We will take pictures first, and then we can start the exciting egg hunt.
I stood frozen, feeling like everything was moving in slow motion. The children ran up to the start of the queue. Patient parents stood by, making sure the kids didn't get too out of hand. As the first child got up to the Easter Bunny, I hustled back over to the man I was speaking to. This time he seemed more annoyed as I gave him a gentle pat on the shoulder. "Sir, look, I'm sorry to bother you again, but I'm just wondering why you would have 2 Easter bunnies here."
We don't have 2 Easter bunnies, okay? I don't know what you are talking about, and frankly, this is starting to sound a bit odd to me. Are you okay?
I tried to say something, but my mouth had gone dry. I think I just moved my head up and down.
Okay, well then line up with your children so we can get these pictures done.
With that, he went back into host mode, encouraging the kids to smile as the photographer took pictures. He made sure to remind them that the egg hunt would be full of fun prizes. Thoroughly confused, I stepped away to get a view of the woods to see if this now imposter Easter doppelganger was still around. And just as I did, the fake bunny rabbit had just slipped into the woods. I wiped a disturbing amount of sweat away from my forehead, for the first time realizing that I must truly appear to be a real piece of work. I turned to the poor organizer MC to apologize for my strange behavior, but he was long gone, directing the children to the start line where the happy chubby-cheeked kids were ready to hunt for their precious treasure-filled eggs. I'm too far in now. I followed the dirty rabbit into the woods. Wonder what those parents thought of some random guy walking through the park into the trees. Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting rabbits. As soon as I broke the threshold into the tree line, time and space appeared to stop. I'm being dramatic, of course, but it was noticeably darker inside of the woods. I've never walked through here. Why would I? There are no trails that I'm aware of, and I don't make it a habit to... What was that? I swear I just heard something running close to me. This can't be happening. A quick look to my left and right reveals nothing. A twig breaking again snaps my focus dead ahead. Slowly, I soldier on. After a few minutes, I'm getting worried. I expect to see this degenerate bunny impersonator holed up in a serial killer-looking shack. Silly, now that I think about it. I'm sure there's no housing structures built inside of a small forest that's also inside of a major suburban area. Before I know it, the forest clears, and I'm on the other side. I wasn't there as long as I think, I imagine. Looking around and getting my thoughts straight, I know where I'm at. It's a side of town I'm familiar with. Everyone here knows this place. It's the bad part of town. There's no reason to be here. I avoid this area if at all There he is, not staring at me this time. I just happened to catch his dirty cottontail shimmy into the apartments. Everyone knows these apartments. Sketchy tenants at best. Like I said, I'm too deep in now. I quietly make my way to the side of the apartment. I only glimpsed a shadow going into the main door, and it appeared to make a right. No way I'd be able to see where he went, unless he left his blinds up. One window, nothing. Next apartment window, nothing. I was thinking maybe I should just call it a night, when an intense rotting smell smacked me in the face that almost took me off my feet. I should have left. I knew as soon as I saw it. A window with crusty newspaper covering it from the inside. But, unfortunately, there was a small piece near the bottom that was missing. I put my good eye up to it. Son of a bitch, that's him. All I can make out is a man, sitting at a folding table, his back to me. How could I tell it was him? He still had that stupid costume on, minus the bunny ears. The back of his head had patchy dark hair, and his neck was dirty, just fear-inducing. Realizing I was holding my breath, I did my best to quietly exhale all the air I had, which made the rabbit jerk his head to the left. Shit! I ducked, but what I saw before haunts me. The best way I can describe what his side profile looked like was a melted-out Voldemort. After being fairly sure I had not soiled myself, I slowly peeked again. He was gone. On the table were eggs, plastic Easter eggs, and next to those eggs were parts. I hesitate to say what they were because it makes me want to vomit. Eyes, fingers, nails. I think I saw a nose. They were small. Dear God, how many Easter egg hunts are there today? I was an obedient child and never got into much trouble. Maybe that's part of why I was never very tough and got scared easily. I have to admit that I was a bit of a crybaby. I must have been around 9 years old when this happened. It was the day before Easter and I was thrilled. Every year my parents would hide chocolate eggs for me around the house, and in the morning the glorious search would begin. By then, I already didn't really believe in the Easter Bunny or Santa anymore. I kind of had a feeling that my parents were behind it all. Of course, this feeling was right, but my childish faith was not completely gone yet. I was just doubtful. That one night, however, my faith was renewed. I think the doubt came in when I was 7, and I heard my dad curse loudly one night when he hit his head carrying one of my Christmas presents downstairs so that I would find it in the morning. He must have thought I was asleep. Well, I wasn't, so I heard him whisper shout at my mom to help him take the goddamn birdcage already. Guess what? I got a bird for Christmas that year. We had to give it away a few months later, but that's an entirely different story. Anyways, it was the night before the Easter egg hunt, and I lay in bed shivering with excitement. I couldn't sleep, and I didn't even try to. I heard my parents shuffle about downstairs. They were talking in hushed voices. The creaking on the lower stairs told me that they were sneaking around the house, probably hiding candy for me to find in the morning. The places they would hide it in were always really tricky and hard to find, so I listened closely, trying to get a few hints on the chocolate's whereabouts.
Let's put one on the top shelf. It'll drive her crazy,
I heard my dad whisper, followed by the sound of my mom giggling. I chuckled. Then I heard one of them coming up the stairs, quietly approaching my room. I pulled my blanket up to my nose and pressed my eyes shut and began to breathe very slowly as to pretend that I was asleep. It was my dad. I could hear him as he made his way past my bed and fumbled around with some papers on my little desk. Then I heard him walk over to the closet where he seemingly stood still for a second, as if he was trying to make out whether I was awake. I felt my lips curling in excitement and managed to quickly press my hand onto my mouth underneath the blanket before I could giggle. Dad let out a small sigh of relief, and I heard him shove something into one of the drawers. He then slowly and ever so quietly made his way out of my room and back down the stairs. "All set?" my mom asked in a low voice.
"Yup, let's go to sleep now. God, I'm tired,"
he whispered back. I don't know when I fell asleep, but it must have been not long after. Maybe 1 hour, maybe 2. Either way, I was woken up by a rather loud creaking noise. Weird, I thought. I had assumed my parents had gone to bed early. I stayed put and focused. There it was again. A creaking noise, as if someone was climbing the upper staircase, the one right outside my room. I felt my heartbeat just a little bit faster. There's no need to be nervous, I told myself. Maybe Dad forgot something. Maybe it's just the house settling. I was growing more and more nervous. Trying to calm down didn't really work anymore. Panic began to set in when I saw how the door slowly inched open and a dark figure entered my bedroom. I held my breath. The figure was tall, way taller than Mom or Dad. I could not see its face or anything about it for that matter. However, there was just enough moonlight falling into my room through the halfway drawn curtains for me to be able to make out its silhouette. It looked like that of a man. On top of its head, however, were 2 long, large things. They looked like rabbit ears. I swallowed. This was not normal. This was not right. My eyes began filling with tears. The next thing I heard was its breathing, long, ragged breaths, the thought of which makes me shiver to this day. It walked over to the window and pulled open the curtains, allowing the bright moonlight to flood my room, illuminating the dark figure. I pressed my eyes shut. I did not want to see what this thing looked like. By now, Tears were running down my cheeks. I could hear it approaching and halting right in front of my bed. Then it spoke to me. In a low, raspy voice it said,
"Don't open your eyes. Let me have a look at you."
It bent down. I felt the blanket being pulled from my head. What followed was the sensation of my face being hit by warm, foul-smelling breath, and then a gloved finger caressing my cheek. My lip was quivering and I could barely hold back a loud sob. It stood like this for a moment, seemingly just staring at me. I was contemplating. What should I do? Should I yell for my parents? Should I try to run? I chose not to take a risk. I was convinced he would get a hold of me and kill me if I did so. I was paralyzed with fear. The voice cooed. Finally, it pulled back its finger. It was still hovering over me, though. I could feel it.
"Good. You're a good little girl. Now, hold out your hand."
I did as I was told and stretched out my little hand from under the blanket. Again, I felt gloved fingers now wrapping around it, as if preparing to shake it. A low chuckle erupted from my side.
"That's a good kid. I have a gift for you. I'll place it in your hand now, but you must promise me to not look at it until next morning. Okay?"
Oh, okay, I whimpered.
"Do you swear on your life?"
I swear on my life.
"Well then, there you are."
I felt something soft and feathery touch my hand. I instantly wrapped my fingers around it. It almost felt like a plushie of some sort, but it was strangely cold to the touch.
"Hey, where are your manners? What do you say when you receive a gift?"
The voice asked in a strict tone. Thank you, Mr. Easter Bunny, I whispered in a cracked voice. Another chuckle.
"How polite you can be. Tell your mommy and daddy I said hi."
With that, it left. I heard it walk down the stairs and then quietly exit through the front door, pulling it shut behind it. I lay there, now beginning to sob quietly, the Easter Bunny's gift still in my hand. I was woken up by my mother's ear-piercing scream. My eyelids fluttered open. It was light outside by now, and my mother was standing over me, a broken cup that must have once held cocoa on the floor next to her feet. I stumbled out of bed right into her arms. "Mom!" I wept. The Easter Bunny scared me. He scared me so much." Strong as she was, my mother picked me up and pressed my head against her shoulder. I suddenly noticed that the gift the Easter Bunny had given me was not in my hand anymore. I tried to turn my head to look for it, but my mother turned around to obscure my view. "No, honey, don't." I struggled in her arms. "Honey, don't look!" she shouted, but it was already too late. The reason for my mother's shock suddenly became clear to me. I had managed to wind out of her grip and had fallen onto the floor right in front of the dead body of a small, yellow chick. That's when I began screaming. I have spent many years of my teenage and young adult life suppressing this memory. Why it came flooding back to me this Easter 6 years later, I don't know. But what I do know by now is that the thing that came to me that night to talk to me and place a dead baby bird in my hand, the thing that spent the last 12 years haunting my nightmares, was not the Easter Bunny. When you hear about the Easter Bunny, you think of the large rabbit that goes around hiding eggs and is associated with Easter. When I hear about the Easter Bunny, I get scared and nearly vomit. The reason for this fear stems from an Easter I will never forget. When I was 16, I was beginning to stray away from the whole Easter Bunny charade, but tried to keep it up for the sake of my nephew. The day began with my family and I going to church for the Easter Sunday service. After it ended, we went to my grandparents' house to give one another Easter eggs and talk about our plans for the day. My mom explained to everyone that she booked tickets to the town Easter egg hunt at 2 o'clock. I deflated a little. I didn't really want to spend most of my day near children screaming, shouting, and running around. I just wanted to spend some time with my family before I go do my own thing. But I had to do it. I didn't want to spoil my nephew's Easter, so I went along. We left shortly afterwards and drove the 10 minutes to the park in which the hunt was taking place, and we parked up between a tree and an oversized SUV that decided to take up 2 spaces instead of 1, and walked towards through the park. The park itself was big. It was the size of a stadium and bordered on a forest that was dense and vast. As we approached the crowd of people that were already there for the hunt, we could hear the excited giggling and laughter of the children and the encouragement of the adults to their children for them to be nice to each other. It was nearly 2, and that was when I spotted a large man in an Easter Bunny costume walking through the crowd, waving and hugging the children. It was the mascot for the event, a random man dressed in a typical Easter Bunny costume that could be bought at any local store. My mom had the idea, and my brother and his wife agreed that we should get a photo together with the mascot. So we walked up to the mascot and asked him if we could take a photo with him. He nodded his head and stood still as we surrounded him. My mom took the photo as I stood beside the mascot. When I was walking away, the mascot tapped my shoulder.
Hey, did you see something while your mom was taking the photo?
No, why? I replied, tilting my head slightly. He looked around and partially removed his rabbit head, revealing only his mouth.
When your mom took the photo, I saw something by the trees over there.
He turned and pointed towards the forest.
Could be my imagination, or this mask is messing with me, but I'm going to check it out. Don't want no weirdos watching the children. Or worse.
He fixed his mask and proceeded to walk towards the tree line. I watched him, but my mom called me as he got halfway, and I realized that the Easter egg hunt was about to begin. I ran to the crowd gathering around the makeshift stage and stood beside my mom as the mayor walked up to the podium and welcomed us all.
Thank you all for coming here today to celebrate this gracious occasion of happiness,
he said with a smile.
The hunt will begin shortly, but we must first declare the rules. First rule.
He held up his index finger.
No stealing. If you take an egg from another person's basket, you will be taken out of the hunt, but you will keep the eggs you have. Second rule.
He raised his middle finger.
Do not go near the woods. That's all I'll say on that. Third rule.
He raised his ring finger.
Always be with an adult you know, mainly your parents. And finally.
He raised his pinky.
Have fun.
He ended with a toothy smile, showing off his yellow-tinted teeth.
Let the hunt begin,
he announced loudly. My brother and I followed my nephew while my mom and sister-in-law decided to participate, for fun. My brother's phone rang halfway through, so he had to step away for a bit and left me helping my nephew, Matthew. We went from place to place searching for a good amount of eggs. At 3:30 p.m., I looked up while Matthew searched a bush and saw the mascot leaving the woods and watched as he approached a child with a red coat. Something seemed off about him now. He must have slipped because he was partially covered with dirt, and I saw a few small patches of blood on the neck of the costume. The gloves on the costume seemed longer, too. The fingers seemed thinner, and the tips were extended with what looked like sharp nails or claws. Before I could get a better look, Matthew yelped, causing me to spin around and see him holding his hand. He looked at me and said, I touched something sharp. It hurts. Okay, can you show me it? I asked with a hint of concern in my voice. He uncovered his hand and showed me a small scratch across the back of his hand. I told him to come with me to the medical tent so he could get a bandage on it. We began walking towards the small tent for children who hurt themselves during these hunts, and I had one last glance towards the mascot, but he and the child were gone. I thought nothing of it and continued on. Matthew got a small bandage for the scratch and we left. I saw my mom, sister-in-law, and brother running towards us.
Where were you two?
my brother yelled to us. Matthew got a scratch, so I brought him to the medical tent. Why? I say, as my brother and sister-in-law hugged Matthew, and my mom did the same to me.
A child has gone missing,
he said, faint hints of worry in his eyes.
He was last seen near the forest. The parents turned their backs for just a minute, and when they turned around,
he said as he began walking. What was he wearing? I might have seen him, I said, hoping it was the child with the red coat. He had blue shorts, green shoes, and a t-shirt, and, a red coat, my sister-in-law said. My heart sank. I stuttered as I said, Yeah, I saw him. He was by the forest, and the mascot walked up to him. The three of them turned to me and stared at me, mouths partially open.
Come on, they're gathering back at the podium,
my brother said as he began jogging towards the gathering crowd. We ran to the stage just in time to hear the mayor address the crowd.
Okay, a child has gone missing, and we need to find him. If anyone has any information, please come forward and give us something to go on.
I put my hand up as I made my way through the crowd. I saw him near the woods with the mascot, I yelled over the sound of children crying and adults talking. The mayor turned to look directly at me.
You!
He pointed at me.
Show us where you last saw him,
he said as he descended the stairs of the stage. I nodded and made my way back through the crowd and led them to the spot where I last saw the child and the mascot. When we got there, the mayor began forming search parties and told everyone to go in a certain direction with an equal distance between them so they can comb the forest easier. Evidently, this wasn't the first time the mayor had to form search parties. I was sent with a group of 20 and we were going straight across the center of the forest. We walked with a foot distance between us. We called the boy's name, which was Michael, as we walked. We stopped at every hole, stream, and creek to search for him. I walked away from the group while calling for Michael and kept an eye out for him. At that time, it was 6:30 p.m. and it was just beginning to get dark. Just before I called the group to discuss going back, I saw a flash of red streak through the trees ahead of me. I yelled to the group, "Hey, I see something!" And without delay, I gave chase. I chased whatever had passed me, ducking and weaving the branches of the trees. And I could see the red of the coat Michael wore, but it was up too high to be a child, and I couldn't see whoever was running ahead of me. I realized that whoever it was fast. I began to feel my chest constricting from exhaustion when I saw the person turn right and run into a clearing. I followed behind and saw the person's outline disappear into a cave that was in the center of the clearing. I approached cautiously, trying not to alert the kidnapper of my presence. The cave was 3 stones, 2 as walls and 1 on top as the roof, and a deep hole that cascaded into darkness. I looked behind me and saw no one. I must have been too fast and the group lost track of me, so I took off my jacket, which was bright orange, and secured it to the cave, so if anyone came across the clearing, they would know that this was where I tracked them to. And then, summoning all the courage I could muster, I descended into the darkness. I felt my way down and took it slow as I crept down the dark shaft of the tunnel. I felt around my pockets for my pocket knife and grabbed a hold of it, but I slipped on something slick and fell on my back down a portion of the tunnel. I hit something hard but stifled a groan as I heard something ahead of me. I got back up and followed the sound. It was faint but audible enough for me to follow it. As I got nearer, I could see a light ahead of me and the sound became clearer. It was humming. I got to the entrance to where the light shone and peeked in. I saw that mascot standing over something. I was close enough to see him in more detail. The fur on the costume was matted and caked in dirt, but seemed more animalistic than before, and the tail of the costume was moving. The gloves on the hands were covered with fur, but had gray skin peeking out from them, and they were caked in what seemed like blood. The back of the mascot's head seemed skin-tight instead of the oversized novelty mask it was wearing earlier, and I could see the ears were twitching. I watched as the mascot moved away from where it was, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The first thing I saw was Michael, or what was left of him anyway. His legs were gone. So were his arms and half of his face. What was left of his face displayed a sheer display of horror and fear. But that wasn't the thing that made my heart stop. As I fought off the urge to be sick, I saw the mascot, no, thing, that was moving away from Michael. Its torso was bright pink but human-like, and its feet were long like a rabbit's, and its legs were bent inward at the knees at an impossible angle. Its arms were bent in on themselves, and its hands were human-like also, but ended in curved, gnarled claws. Its face was a mashup of both man and rabbit. Its eyes were human but dark red. Its mouth was rabbit-like with 2 buck teeth sticking out jaggedly, and its nose was a dot on its face with whiskers pointing outwards. I stared with a mixture of disbelief, horror, and fear as I fought vigorously against the urge to be sick. It walked out of sight, and I took that opportunity to sneak over and try to get what was left of Michael and leave. I scooped up his corpse and turned to run as I heard a deafening screech coming from my right. And as I turned towards it, I saw the hybrid standing with claws extended. It began slamming its right foot against the dirt floor, causing an earthquake-like shaking in what I now realize was its burrow. I turned around and ran, carrying Michael's body on my back. I ran in the dark, struggling to keep on my feet, and the shaking stopped, and I heard pounding footsteps coming from behind me. I ran, but I heard the footsteps coming closer until I felt a warm pain radiating from my back. I fell down with a yell and cracked my head on a rock. Without delay, I felt the creature apply all of its weight onto me, and I saw the outline of its face coming close to mine. I reached out a hand to stop its face from getting closer. I made contact with its face, and it was like coarse leather. I struggled to keep its face away from mine as I heard it snap its mouth open and close. My hand slipped, and it took that opportunity to bite down on my index finger. I screamed as it bit down and almost severed my finger in one bite. I used my free hand to get my pocket knife, and with a yell of anger, I jammed it into his left eye. The hybrid screeched as it detached itself from me, knife still in my hand, and writhed in pain on the floor. I took that as an opportunity to escape. I picked Michael's body up and carried it with extreme difficulty and pain up the slope and out into the dim orange light. I stopped at the entrance and looked back down to see the face of the hybrid creature peering out of the darkness. Its left eye was nothing but a bloody hole, but its right eye was pure fury. It sank into a crouched position and jumped towards me. I moved just as it jumped and maneuvered myself away from its grasp as it sailed past me and crashed onto the ground. It rose up and tried to advance, but as it did so, a yell called out from the tree line and I saw a figure appear from it. It was my brother. The creature glared from my brother back to me, pointed at me and hissed,
"Mine."
before it sprang back down the hole and out of sight. I stared at the hole until my brother called out to me again. I called back to him and I heard him run towards me. I met him halfway and collapsed to the floor. I saw his face enter my peripheral vision and yell,
"They're over here!"
to the people out of sight. I stared at the one visible star in the sky as my vision blurred and darkened until all was black. I awoke in a hospital bed the next day, and I was greeted by my family next to me. My brother turned around and noticed that I was awake.
"Thank God,"
he exclaimed as he walked over and clamped his hand over my shoulder. My mom and sister-in-law did the same. They told me that I had deep cuts from my right shoulder to my left hip, and that it was a miracle that it didn't damage my spine. And they had to amputate my finger because it was attached by just a string of flesh. I heard that Michael was brought down to the morgue for an autopsy. They asked me what happened, but after I told them, they said I must have been attacked by a bear instead, and I was imagining the creature because of shock. I didn't contest it because I'd just be arguing with a brick wall. They told me that the police searched every inch of that cave and found nothing of the sort in there, but they found a small hole that led back out into the forest. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks before I could go home. When I was checked out, I heard they found the body of the mascot deep into the cave. Apparently he was ripped apart, but the police determined that he died from severe blood loss from his throat that was ripped out. Looking back, I realized that the blood on the creature's neck when it took Michael must have been from the mascot. I left the hospital and was interviewed by the local paper on my encounter. I told them the cover story about how I was attacked by a bear and just escaped with my life and Michael's body. Now, years later, I'm staring at the hole where my index finger should be. I'm recounting the story and writing it down because my own son just came into my room and asked me why the Easter Bunny is outside his window again, calling to him. I'm getting ready now to go out and chase him away with my shotgun. The bastard has been trying this for years, trying to lure me and my family out into the open to kill us. But every year afterwards, I was ready. So I'll leave you now to chase the bastard away, but I'll leave you with some advice. If you see something looking like the Easter Bunny, don't go near it. You might just end up as its next meal. Good night and happy Easter.